Today, when we are debating the foreign ministry votes, the first thing that strikes me is Sri Lanka's passports. If you have a Sri Lankan passport, it's 97th among global passports, according to the guide on passport ranking, the Henley's guide, right, which is the world's probably top ranking of passports. We are 97. What does it mean? It means that the top countries in the world, if you have a passport, you have access to 40 countries without a visa. Sri Lanka has very little access to other countries to get a visa on arrival. Among those countries are Pakistan, Singapore, and Dominica. I was in Dubai just this week, and even to go to Dubai now, you need a visa. So this is the real state. And if our foreign policy is to be measured in terms of what needs to be done, a lot of things need to be done. Now I know that we belong to the non-aligned movement, and we have a very proud history about that. But NAM is only a platform. Today our foreign policy has to be a multi-aligned with nations and entities currently who hold and will wield global power. Most countries in the world are like that. They are in numerous associations, not like in the bipolar world into which we were born. Such an approach must be both strategic in content and long-term, and tactical in its application as well, but in line with our national interests and aspirations, and I emphasize, of all the communities living in this country. Therefore, it is prudent to embrace a multilateral system promoting a global world order governed by the rule of law and international norms. The United Nations Charter reminds us the non-use of force, peaceful resolution, and settlement of conflicts. So Sri Lanka's national security is not a military endeavor. We are a little island nation. Our national security largely rests with the foreign policy of the country and the role the foreign ministry actually plays. Where appropriate, Sri Lanka may enter into defense, security, naval, non-military agreements to boost the country's national and maritime security. Such collaboration will facilitate networking opportunities for the country's navy and the country's ports to bring about more value to the economy. So, our foreign policy now must, as a strategy, engage and have economic diplomacy at its core in policy formulation. Sri Lanka must trade with all states for mutual benefit, and we have to maintain our open market strategy. Now we know that maybe 10-15% of our population lives overseas, and largely they live overseas for economic reasons. They live overseas, and therefore they are very, very important for us. Furthermore, we also need to be mindful that we need to have good relations with all our neighboring countries. In the geopolitics of today, this is the challenge that a small country like us faces, and the decisions that we have to actually take. We must acknowledge, however, in building those relationships, first we need to acknowledge our own constraints, both internal and external. Internal constraints, the state of governance and the institutions in this country. Rule of law, the economy, human rights, reconciliation, politico-military religious nexus and related problems, climate and environmental realities, social issues in terms of health, aging population, and human resource constraints. These are our internal issues. Externally, we also need to understand we have limitations in market and human skills and the immediate neighborhood and beyond. So we have to re-establish, if you want, our credibility. And this is critical, both internally and externally. Rebuilding credibility is essential in restoring trust and confidence internally, particularly among the minorities in this country. Are just throwing shots at each other across the will in Parliament is not really going to help us. This is very, very unfortunate. We have to work with our bilateral partner nations that have close to us, even countries like Japan, USA, Canada. These for decades have been working very closely with us. We must face up to the fact that we have to uphold domestic responsibilities. Because if we don't uphold domestic responsibilities, our sovereignty erodes. Not for any other reason. There's no point blaming other countries about this. Taking measures to rebuild and regain our sovereignty must be of critical importance. Therefore, we need an authentic rebranding of this country. I don't want to hold a Sri Lankan passport 97th on the rank, when some of us who even studied, lived abroad, had the option of taking other citizenships and passports. We did not, because we want to rebuild this country. We don't want to be at 97. We need to rebrand our country. We must identify and stand to represent fundamental values. This endeavor must be an authentic one, where Sri Lanka says it is democratic, multi-ethnic, multilingual, and stands for human rights. It has to mean what it says and build a reputation for actually being so. Not to come here and just damn every institution and the United Nations and the UNHRC and all these other parties. If we do the right thing, we don't have to be really concerned about others. We need to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific with active and unimpeded sea lanes and ports. Among other measures, we have a potential to be interconnected, secure, resilient, and a prosperous region. Sri Lanka must, as the chair now of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, leverage the opportunity in resolving the multitude of regional concerns in consultation with member countries as we lead them. Sri Lanka must pursue its commitment to the Bali process, and we have to position ourselves as a regional leader in advocating the fight against human trafficking. This is thrown at us when we go into other countries. People smuggling and related transnational crimes. We have to really work hard at this, rebrand ourselves and our country. We must uphold the principles of the US Indo-Pacific strategy. What are these principles? Problems are dealt with openly. Rules are agreed upon transparently and applied fairly. People, ideas, and goods flow freely across the land, cyberspace and open space, with governance that is transparent and responsible to the people of this country. This is the foreign policy that we need. We must be committed to regional integration. SAARC is the least integrated part of the world. And unfortunately, it's out of our hands because of India's relationships with Pakistan. But we must pay attention to BIMSTEC. It's only functional regional platform, if you want, at this moment. Again, President Jayawardene explored our relationship with ASEAN. I will call upon the government to explore our relationships 30, 40 years later, even with ASEAN. The world order has changed, and other countries, small countries, have done these very drastic things. We need to think about these anew. Traditionally close and friendly relations with India must be nurtured with a view of benefiting from India's rise as a major economic and political power. India is very important. Our relationship with India is one to be projected with exclusivity, and one that Sri Lanka has engaged over the millennia. And I don't think there's any debate whether we are in government or in opposition about it. We have a long-standing friendship with China, but in different forms and manifestations, especially in the context of rise of China in this century as an economic power. Sri Lanka joined the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative for a mutually beneficial enterprise. However, there are some concerns in Sri Lanka that projects in Sri Lanka, despite its enormous costs, both to Sri Lanka and China, are yet to yield the expected results. I have been a critic of some of those infrastructure projects because they were on long-term debt rather than on equity. And we have to pay the debt, and the results come over 20, 30, 40 years. and with the wisdom of actually engaging in some of these. In this context, the burden of Sri Lanka, debt burden, is a major cause for concern. Though the debt debacle is totally a Sri Lankan-made debt, and China is not central to this issue. I had to make that absolutely critical. We had the option of taking or not taking, but still we call upon China to basically take an initiative to create the path for us to recover out of the debacle that we are actually in. I would also pose a couple of questions to the minister who is here, and when he's responding, Millennium Challenge Corporation and the status of Forces Agreement so far. What's really happening on it? How are the negotiations going? Are we concluding? Presently, Singapore is the base for these ships. However, Sri Lanka has the potential to become the regional hub for these ships with suitable international diplomatic trade engagements. Sri Lanka must pursue such international agreements. We don't have to run away because so long we have been trying to push to a corner. Our priority has to be able to create a country and a society in which all our children live in this country because it has a future. And that means engaging, thinking out of the box, not going back to our archaic way of thinking about our foreign policy, not being bullied by anybody because of that. And therefore, we have to think about how are we going to actually engage. We gave Singapore this opportunity 40 years ago. We have the natural ports in this country. We need to have the income. And therefore, we need to look at how we are going to engage. Sri Lanka must pursue such international engagements, particularly where domestic politics
you have 2 more minutes.
Impacted the outcome of the country, as is the case with MCC. I remember during the presidential election how politicians got up and just screamed and shouted about MCC and actually destroyed an opportunity. Let's not do that with our engagement on using our ports and really making money out of our ports. I would like to conclude with some operational modalities, which I would like to leave with you. I heard the minister in the morning in his speech say that we need to maintain an ideal mix of career diplomats of about 65%. I want to say that the SJB's foreign policy, we want to keep 75% of career diplomats, and we need to keep them because that's their job. That's what they are going to be trained for. That's what they are going to be encouraged to do because that's our defense, and that's also our front line in economic prosperity is going to be our foreign ministry. So the purpose driven for a thriving political economy, international trade and finance, Sri Lanka must appoint qualified and experienced career diplomats in strategic markets, including new markets. And we need to do this in consultation with commerce and trade. And it's imperative that economic diplomacy strategy is compiled upon the pillars of investment, trade, and tourism. Now in the recruitment process, which has been going on in the past few weeks, I would say we need to relook at it. Sri Lanka has a mentality, even if you are going to do dancing and singing, and cultural things, we only want to look at the ISET score. I said very soon we will have people who can answer papers but can't sing and can't dance. Same thing is going to happen to our foreign ministry.
Honourable member, your time is over.
Okay, I'll conclude quickly. So we need to look at that. Appointment of relations of politicians must be halted. No question about it. It doesn't matter if it's from that side or this side, it must be halted. Appointment of defense officials into diplomatic positions where there are allegations, maybe proven, unproven, it doesn't matter.
Please wind up.
Shouldn't be appointed. And I am even asking, how does the High Post Committee appoint such people? We must move away from individuals to principles to see this country go forward. So therefore, I would say in conclusion, right, that we have to move away. I would say, Mr. Minister, the Sri Lankan services, overseas consular services, answering the phone, courtesy, basic things have to be improved. And there is a lack of it. I must commend the Dubai Consular General, whom I did not meet on the recent visit, but I heard reports. What a wonderful job he is doing it. So therefore, I would say that we need to look at it. I would also say the president goes around castigating Quad and AUKUS, and so forth. I don't
Honourable
think
member, please
these are
wind up.
wise moves given the Indo-Pacific strategy. Even Bangladesh has recently had its own one, and ASEAN has had its own one. Therefore, I would say, even RTI, earlier Foreign Ministry was in front in answering RTI questions. It's got back and excuses are given. The websites don't carry RTI officials across the country. I would suggest we do these things to really improve our services, and because we need to serve Sri Lankans living overseas who are a big asset to this country and not a liability that people used to think they were. Thank you again.